In the year 2000, an empire laughed at an assassin. Blockbuster Video controlled the board, 9,000 global strongholds, a revenue stream built entirely on punishing its own customers. When a struggling startup offered them a digital alliance, they declined. It was the most expensive joke in corporate history. This is not a story about technology replacing VHS tapes. This is a classified briefing on hubris, a masterclass in asymmetrical warfare. This is the story of how an undisputed monopoly was bled out, envelope by envelope, until there was nothing left but a single, hollowed-out storefront in Bend, Oregon, the last Blockbuster on Earth. Initiating file, the digital guillotine. To understand the collapse, you must understand the fortress. In the late 1990s, Blockbuster wasn't just a market leader. They were the infrastructure of Friday nights. You didn't decide to watch a movie, you decided to go to Blockbuster. The distinction mattered, because Blockbuster wasn't selling movies. They were selling a ritual, the drive over, the argument about which section to start in, the cover art, the smell of popcorn near the register. They held a ruthless operational advantage, proximity. 70% of the American population lived within a 10-minute drive of a Blockbuster store. By 2004, they employed over 60,000 people. They were a cultural institution, but their business model harbored a toxic, highly profitable secret. It was called managed dissatisfaction. Blockbuster didn't just make money renting movies, they made hundreds of millions of dollars, nearly $800 million in the year 2000 alone, by penalizing you for returning them late. Late fees weren't an accident, they were weaponized revenue. Every customer who forgot to return a tape by midnight was automatically converted into a profit center. You didn't just pay for the movie, you paid for the inconvenience of being human. Blockbuster built a financial empire that actively required its customers to fail. And in the art of war, a fortress built on resentment is a fortress waiting for a spark. The assassin had a name, Reed Hastings. In 1997, Hastings returned a copy of Apollo 13 to his local Blockbuster. It was 6 weeks late. The late fee was $40. He paid it. He walked to his car, and somewhere between the parking lot and the gym he was driving to, he started doing math. What if you could pay one flat price and never worry about late fees again? He called his friend Mark Randolph. Together, they founded Netflix. The origin story is almost too clean, almost too personal. Some historians dispute whether the late fee story is entirely true or whether Hastings shaped it into legend after the fact. It doesn't matter. What matters is what it represented. A man who understood his enemy's weakness because he had personally bled from it. That is the most dangerous kind of founder, not someone building a product. Someone settling a score. Enter Netflix. 1997. They did not have 9,000 stores. They did not have brand loyalty. They did not have a marketing budget. What they had was a logistical supply line and a fundamental understanding of their enemy's fatal flaw. Netflix bypassed the storefront entirely. They deployed a direct-to-consumer strike using the United States Postal Service. A subscription model, flat fee, no late fees, ever. DVD by mail sounds almost comically simple in retrospect, but at the time, it was surgical. Their true lethal weapon was a two-word policy that struck directly at Blockbuster's $800 million Achilles heel. No, wait, fees. It was a brilliantly asymmetrical tactic. Netflix wasn't asking customers to visit a new store. They were offering them sanctuary from Blockbuster's financial punishment. The red envelopes began infiltrating millions of homes, a slow, silent deployment, and Blockbuster saw none of it coming because Blockbuster wasn't watching the mail, They were watching their own registers, still counting late fee receipts, still printing profit. The fortress had no idea the walls were already dissolving. September 2000, Blockbuster headquarters, Dallas, Texas. The dot-com bubble had burst. Netflix was burning cash. The startup was bleeding. Reed Hastings secured a meeting with Blockbuster's commander, CEO John Antioco. The terms were simple. Netflix proposed a strategic alliance. Blockbuster would acquire Netflix for $50 million. In exchange, Netflix would build and run Blockbuster's entire online infrastructure. It was a perfect hybrid engine. Physical stores combined with digital reach. The distribution muscle of 9,000 locations fused with the data intelligence of Netflix's algorithm. Total market dominance. Antioco listened. He looked at the numbers. And then he laughed. He literally laughed them out of the boardroom. He viewed Netflix as a niche, unprofitable novelty, a quirky mail-order curiosity for people who didn't want to leave their houses. Not a threat, a punchline. In military terms, Blockbuster was handed the enemy's radar codes and threw them in the incinerator. That $50 million acquisition offer would have been the cheapest purchase in media history. Today, Netflix is worth over $300 billion. The laugh cost them everything. Surviving the rejection, Netflix went back to the bunker. They made a decision that would define the next decade of media. They stopped thinking of themselves as a logistics company. They became a data company. While Blockbuster relied on teenagers in blue polo shirts to recommend movies, Netflix engineered Cinematch, a predictive algorithmic engine. Every rental, every rating, every film left unwatched at the bottom of the queue, tracked, analyzed, weaponized. The algorithm didn't just give customers what they wanted, it manipulated demand to match Netflix's physical inventory. They were mapping the psychological profile of 30 million consumers simultaneously. Blockbuster saw a rental transaction. Netflix saw a data point, and data compounds. Every day Netflix collected information, Blockbuster fell further behind a gap that could no longer be bridged by building more stores. The battlefield had shifted from physical real estate to digital surveillance. Blockbuster didn't own a single server that understood what their customers actually wanted. Netflix owned the map. By 2004, the laughter in Dallas had stopped. The red envelopes were ubiquitous. Netflix's subscriber base was scaling exponentially. 3 million subscribers, then 5, then 10. Blockbuster's internal metrics were flashing red. The bleeding could no longer be ignored. The fortress was taking artillery fire from an enemy they still couldn't fully see. Blockbuster finally initiated their counteroffensive. They launched Blockbuster Online. They eliminated late fees. That last decision was seismic. Eliminating late fees wiped out hundreds of millions in guaranteed annual revenue overnight. It was a restructuring so massive, it sent shockwaves through their entire financial model. Franchisees were furious. Investors were skeptical, but Antioco understood the threat now. He understood what he was fighting. The sleeping giant had finally woken up. The problem was the calendar. In the tech sector, waking up 5 years late is usually fatal. But Blockbuster was not entirely incompetent. In 2006, they deployed a masterstroke. Blockbuster Total Access. It was a devastating hybrid weapon. Customers could rent a DVD online, receive it by mail, and then walk into any Blockbuster store to exchange it instantly for a new title. No waiting, no return envelopes, immediate gratification. Netflix couldn't replicate this. Netflix had no stores. Netflix had no counters. Netflix had no human beings handing you a movie while you stood there in your coat. Total Access was a kinetic strike. that shattered Netflix's momentum. For the first time in years, Blockbuster was reclaiming territory. Netflix's subscriber growth stalled. Reed Hastings later admitted, "This was the moment Netflix almost lost the war." Inside Blockbuster's war room, the energy was electric, the strategy was working, the giant had found its weapon. All they needed was time. Time to let total access compound, time to pull subscribers back, time to rebuild the fortress with digital walls. They did not get that time. Just as Blockbuster had Netflix pinned down, the fatal blow came, not from the enemy, from inside the command bunker. Enter Carl Icahn, the activist investor, the corporate raider, the man who had made a career out of buying wounded companies and extracting every last drop of short-term value. Icahn looked at the balance sheet. He saw total access burning cash, reportedly $200 million to deploy. He didn't see a war being won. He saw a line item he wanted eliminated. He didn't care about the digital battlefield of tomorrow. He cared about the profit margins of this quarter. A brutal proxy war erupted in the boardroom. Icahn forced out CEO John Antioco, the architect of the only strategy that had ever made Netflix sweat. Gone. The new regime immediately cut the supply lines. They raised subscription prices, they reintroduced forms of late fees, they gutted total access to protect short-term margins. Blockbuster pulled its troops off the front line at the exact moment they were winning and handed the victory directly to Netflix. Reed Hastings sent flowers, not literally, but the internal relief inside Netflix headquarters must have felt exactly like that. The war was not won by disruption. It was won by self-destruction. 2007, the year the world changed. While Blockbuster was busy retreating to its physical stores, Netflix initiated Phase 2. They bypassed physical media entirely. They deployed Watch Now, streaming, no disc, no envelope, no drive to the store, no late fees, because there was nothing to return. The DVD was no longer the product. The digital pipe was the product. Blockbuster, saddled with nearly $1 billion in debt from bad acquisitions and physical store leases, was paralyzed. They were chained to a sinking ship of brick and mortar, paying rent on 9,000 buildings to house a product no longer needed. The collapse was exponential. Store closures accelerated. The stock price cratered. Creditors circled. By September 2010, the empire that once boasted 9,000 strongholds filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The blue and yellow signs were taken down. The monitors went dark. The drop boxes were bolted shut. The digital guillotine had dropped. There is one Blockbuster left on Earth, Bend, Oregon. It is not a museum. It is a functioning video rental store. People drive there on Friday nights. They walk the aisles. They argue about which section to start in. They smell the popcorn near the register. The ritual survived. The empire didn't. The owner, Sandy Harding, has been running it since 2008. She's kept it alive through pure community loyalty and a kind of stubborn, beautiful refusal to let the last light go out. It's become a tourist destination. People travel from across the country just to stand inside it, just to remember what Friday nights used to feel like. It's the saddest monument to corporate arrogance ever built. And it sells $3.99 rentals, no late fees. Blockbuster didn't die because of streaming. They died because of arrogance. They died because they confused their current delivery method with their actual product. They believed their customers loved the store. They failed to realize their customers only loved the movies. The moment a frictionless alternative appeared, the loyalty evaporated overnight. They were offered the future for $50 million. They laughed. They built the only weapon that could have won the war. They dismantled it themselves. They had the data, the brand, the real estate, the relationships. They had every advantage, and they lost. Because in a war for attention, for relevance, for the living room, you cannot build an empire by punishing the people who fund it. Every industry has a Blockbuster right now, a fortress built on managed dissatisfaction, a monopoly that mistakes its customers' habit for their loyalty. The red envelopes are already in the mail. File closed.